I should like to begin by asking Mr. Bernstein whether he feels free to vouchsafe to us his feelings based on his familiarity with the case, on whether Mr. Nixon knew A, about Watergate, and then B, about the cover-up.
Well, all I think that we have to go on are the best evidence there, and neither of us is a judge. I think we can just make the same judgments as anyone else. Primarily the presidential tape recordings. On those recordings, there's no indication that the president had prior knowledge of the Watergate break-in. There are several statements that the president makes, both in the transcripts and in the additions to the transcripts provided by the House Judiciary Committee, where the president indicates some degree of knowledge of what's been called the cover-up. Now, whether or not that's illegal, I don't think that as reporters, we're really not jurors. We're in the business of trying to report, not make a judgment.
No, but you don't object to being impaneled, do you? Or do you?
I don't.
If you have, you know, if you have misgivings about revealing what your own conclusions are on the grounds that your own conclusions may be tendentious, I don't mind you saying that.
Well, I think that like anybody else, we have our own feelings. Yet, as reporters, I think we really prize our ability to detach ourselves in covering the story, and very much as a juror does. As a juror might have political beliefs or whatever. When he gets in a jury box, he really becomes a person who's interested in facts, not passions, in evidence.
Speaking of detachment, let me quote from your book, where you came in with a piece of evidence and you presented it to the boss, Ben Bradley. There was at least one witness, the book says, who could do some damage to Mitchell, Colson, Ehrlichman, and Dean. Bradley's eyes brightened. He did a little dance, holding an imaginary towel to his ass and wiggling it back and forth before walking off. Is that typical detachment in the Washington Post?
I think that in deciding to write this book, which is really not a Watergate book, but a book of journalism and how one newspaper worked on one story, we decided to tell all. And sometimes the exuberance of the moment, this was during a period after we had suffered really a series of attacks, very strident attacks by the White House, really denying our stories, calling us character assassins and practitioners of shoddy journalism, and we were very much on the defensive. And so he responded with a little towel to his ass.
I think that has to do more with our own credibility than taking any joy in the guilt of others or something like that.
Well, but there is a certain prosecutorial feel in the story, isn't there, that is by no means confined to the Washington Post. I detect it sometimes in National Review's Washington correspondent.
Mr. Will?
George Will, who is a columnist for the Washington Post also. I don't think so. At least, as Carl was saying, we certainly have our feelings, but you quickly learn that in the newspaper business it does not serve your interest to put inaccurate information in the paper or information that has a political twist to it.
The other thing, when you talk about being prosecutorial, a prosecutor presents one side of a case, and only one side of a case, whereas I think that throughout the Washington Post coverage, as well as other newspapers, that both sides of the case have been presented. I mean, anytime we put any kind of allegation in the paper, the first thing we do is go to the person who we're writing about and saying, you know, what about this? Is this right? And certainly there have been numerous occasions when people have told us, no, you're off base, here's why. We've held back, we've kept it out of the paper, and indeed, if somebody, you know, can show us that we're wrong, we wouldn't put it in the paper.
Well, I understand that. And if, for instance, Deep Throat gave you a tape recording tomorrow, which absolutely established Nixon's innocence of the cover-up, you would certainly run it as a story.
Yes, indeed.
But there would be a general sense of deflation, wouldn't there?
No, I don't think so, because we try to spend as much time as we can talking to people in the White House, looking at their side of the story. Often the White House conversations about a certain allegation will would consist of saying the sources of the Washington Post are a fountain of misinformation, and leave it at that, and they would go no further. Sometimes they will engage in a somewhat constructive dialogue, and we try to do that. And the story has gone way beyond what we ever really wrote, predicted, or had any notion of. And we have no real stake in an eventual outcome of establishing the guild of the president.
You mean as individuals?
As
Well,
individual, as an
reporters.
institution, I think the Washington
Reporting
Post
isn't
is more-
about that, establishing guilt.